It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio.
Welcome to this Friday edition of the RealAg Radio Show. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and yes, it is Friday. It is September 1st. It is pumpkin spice season. I'm just kidding. That's not till after Labor Day. But it is the issues panel and the beef market update today, so I am super pumped for today's show. I also wanted to mention, yes, this is a full 2 weeks that I've been hosting the show, save for the Monday show that Kelvin did, which I appreciate very much. And I have absolutely loved doing this show for 2 weeks. It is so much fun to think about the story ideas, things to cover, who to have on the show. And so I hope you've enjoyed it. Sean will be back next week on Wednesday. Monday, of course, is the holiday. Tuesday, I'll be back with Tuesdays with Lyndsey. But then your regular host, Sean Haney, will be back in the driver's seat on Wednesday. So any feedback, of course, zip me an email, lsmith@realagriculture.com. You can find me on social media at RealLoudLyndsey. That's LYNDSEY, because my mother couldn't spell. Or you can, of course, just find Real Agriculture online, realagriculture.com, or, of course, across social media at Real Agriculture. Okay, as mentioned, Anne Wasko will be on the show today to talk beef markets. I'm going to ask her about the cow herd because I'm a little concerned, and I bet some of you are too. And then for the issues panel, I will have my colleague Kelvin Heppner on, as well as Stuart Person with MNP. He's based out of Alberta. We've got some significant questions about Agristability, interest rates, inflation, recession, and water wars, if you will. So we are going to be talking about all of that over the issues panel. So stick around all the way to the end. We've got some good stuff lined up. Can't wait to hear what the panel has to say about that. Okay. As I mentioned, Tuesday, I will be back with Tuesdays with Lyndsey. And we head into that best time of the year. That's right. Back to school. I'm so pumped. I desperately would like my house back during the day. All right. Let's take a quick break. I will come back. I'll be joined by Anne Wasko of the Gateway Livestock Exchange for the beef market update right after this.
This is the sound of a farmer with a clear view of their fields and finances.
As is this.
And this.
Crop planning, profit reports, budget, cash flow statements, all laid out clearly with Ag Expert.
To view from inside the combine or in the field, projecting what's next.
Get valuable perspective anywhere you are. Ag Expert, farm management software built for Canadian farms. Visit agexpert.ca to get started today.
What were the issues in your fields this year? Did you do a soil sample? What is your soil sample telling you about some of the nutrient issues that you might be having going into next year? What herbicides did you use? What residues you might be concerned about? What weed issues did you have? What crop residues did you have? How well do you know your fields?
Get the answers to all the questions you have about your pulse crop at the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com.
Introducing the all-new Xerion 12 Series tractor by Kloss. Redesigned from the ground up to redefine the high-capacity four-wheel drive market. With 653 max horsepower, industry-leading hydraulic flow, a silky smooth CVT, a powerful TerraTrack undercarriage, and a quiet, comfortable cab with 20% more legroom. More than just power. The all-new Xerion by Kloss.
To RealAg Radio here on this Friday, September 1st. This segment is brought to you by the pre-emergent soil-active herbicides Valterra EZ and Fierce EZ from New Farm. Get ahead of hard-to-kill weeds. Spray this fall for up to 8 weeks of extended weed control next spring. Find out more about New Farm products at newfarm.ca. All right, joining me now, it's Anne Wasko. It is time for the beef market update. Anne, how are you?
I am good. Lyndsey, you've done a done a big fill-in for a couple of weeks. Good for you.
Yeah, well, thanks. Praise is welcome. It has been, it is a lot of fun to host the show, but it is a lot of work. So hats off to Sean Haney for doing this every day, all year. 2 weeks in a row in late August, with some of the kids still home, because, school doesn't start till next week. It's been a challenge. Let's put it that way. But we can do hard things, Anne. We can do hard things. Okay,
yeah,
we can. Let's talk beef markets as per usual. Let's start in the U.S. and work our way north.
Yeah, so markets this week in the U.S., a little bit mixed. In the South, I'd say most of the trade at 179, which will be, for the most part, steady. In the North, though, a little bit of weakness showing up there, 1 to 3 lower on the live, 182 to 184, while the dress market was off a couple to 290 delivered. So a little mixed, no big surprise. The market still, for the most part, sideways chop on the weighted average, the 5-area average. The cutout this week, it had a nice improvement up to the middle of the month, leading into Labor Day. But now that most of that business is done, in terms of buying for that long weekend for the retailers, the choice did lose about $4 this week. It closed last night at $313.80. And the flex still sitting about $25 back. So, again, none of those, I think, are surprises. Now, once we roll into September, especially, kind of a month from now, we'll be looking for these markets time to start to shine for Q4, but you can take your breather now. That's how I'd maybe define it. Here in the West, just to finish up on markets, our local cash market in Alberta, $390 delivered. That's up $2. And a little bit of live trade at 231. So kind of a little firmer footing to finish off August here in the West.
All right. And now, as you said, sort of, expected numbers, but looking through this month for things to start to pick up. Is September typically a lull kind of month on these prices? Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So
yeah.
Now we take our little reprieve until we get into Q4, where we have some great demand for usually for middle meat. So yes, they're going to be high priced this year. What kind of response happens as we go forward? But certainly we know supplies are going to be on the tighter side as we head into Q4. So looking for that to support the market, and those are the things we'll be watching to see how things play out.
Okay. All right. We did get some StatsCan data for the July 1 numbers. What did those tell us?
Yeah, so this is that mid-year inventory report. If your listeners remember, we talked about the U.S. report a little bit ago. StatsCan released theirs now. So this is July 1 cattle inventory report. And as expected, liquidation in Canada continued through the first half of 2023. No surprise. And then, of course, since this report, drought's certainly intensifying, especially in parts of Western Canada where the cow herd lives. So my maybe warning or kind of a heads up to listeners is that I think we'll see even more so of a response by the time we get around to the next report on January 1st, 2024. But in the meantime, this report showed nationally our beef cow numbers down 1.5%. If you go back and look at even just since 2020, they're down 3.5%. And in the past 10 years, they've dropped 7%. So no surprise. We know what the cow herd's been doing in Canada, and that continued on this last report. Now, the piece of the puzzle that we watch to say when will something change is, of course, has to come from the heifer side, right? Mm-hmm. So beef replacement heifers were down 3% versus last year. They're now down 12% from 2020. Wow. So again, there's absolutely no signs of any retention going on, and until that piece changes, there is, we've got no hope of seeing a bigger herd. So, the writing's on the wall, if you will. Now, the one piece that if you're a cow-calf producer in this country that, you're going to continue, I think, to see strong support on feeder cattle and calf prices is our beef calf crop, down 3% versus last year, down 6% from 2020. And this will be the smallest beef calf crop that in recent history, like for over 30 years. So that's going to keep, that tells that supply story, especially on the feeder side. And I think that's the bottom line as we kind of sum up this report.
Yeesh. So, and of course, prices are good, which is the time when you want to have lots of calves to sell. But this is how things go, isn't it? When you have cattle take a cow or a heifer when she's born, she's not giving you a calf for a couple of years, and then that calf doesn't go to market for 18 months or so. It's a long process or a long supply chain, right? So changes, of course, happen over time. We can't also just immediately change gears. Everything happens over time. So watching that heifer replacement piece, did the cattle on feed numbers tell us more about just how many heifers are going to town?
Good point, Lyndsey. And so for sure, this is something we can watch each month because CanFax reports a cattle on feed report here in Western Canada. So let's just go back and look at, say, for example, in June and July, that Western Canadian heifer placement, so this is heifers going on feed, were up 50% from 2022. Even compared to the drought, what we call the drought year of 21, they were up 25%. So already, and none of this would have been reflected in that StatsCan report yet. So again, clearly, indicating what's going on here in Western Canada in terms of heifers are heading on feed. They are not staying in the herd. And then the other piece, I think, just to kind of round out the cattle on feed numbers is cow slaughter. So nationally, we saw June and July cow slaughter here in Canada up 2% for both months. The preliminary data, and we've got another month or a week to finish for this month, but it looks like August data could be up 16%. So again, all of these things will impact the January 2024 report.
So when there's two things happening here, right? There's no feed. And this is, there was an improvement, let's say, in some areas over 21 for sure. But perhaps some areas this year have sort of slid back, definitely. So we've got not a lot of feed and prices are quite strong. Where's the business case for keeping heifers? There isn't one. So,
I mean, everybody's going to be different. And exactly. You just illustrated there's areas that have had, some moisture and have had some grass and areas that haven't. So, I mean, this is as varied and different as you would expect across the country. So, but having said all that, there's certainly, you've got record high prices occurring. It doesn't look like that train is stopping at all as we head into the fall run and head into 2024. So again, I guess if you're being forced to liquidate cattle, thank goodness we've got record prices to handle that. Yeah,
but definitely some questions about what the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years looks like for this cattle herd for sure. Okay, let's round off on carcass weights. Of course, tell us a few things. Where are we at on carcass weights as far as up, down, the same, west and east?
Yeah. So good catch as well. We're always watching to say, are our feedlots current? How we doing? Have we got a chance to, rally this market some more? And I think this kind of helped or is showing in this local Western Canadian market with that higher price we saw this week. Bottom line, I think, is in Western Canada, feedlots are pretty current. Overall, nationally, our weights on steer weights last week were 920 pounds. That's 4 pounds below last year. But what the bottom line is, Western Canadian weights are down, but Ontario weights are creeping heavier. So an indication, kind of just a warning sign, I would say, just watching those weights in Western or in Eastern Canada that are inching higher, and maybe feedlots not quite as current in Ontario as they are, say, in Alberta.
All right, something to watch for sure. All right, Anne Wasko joining us from East End, Saskatchewan. I hope you have a wonderful long weekend and get some of that beef sizzling on the barbecue.
You got it. You too. Thanks, Lyndsey.
All right, we'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
Did you know that Pioneer now has a full lineup of Enlist E3 soybeans? Take a look at Pioneer brand Enlist E3 soybeans for the highest yield potential and for the best agronomic package and herbicide trait options. From the lab to the field, Pioneer brand Enlist E3 soybeans are the best in beans, period. Ask your local Pioneer representative about Enlist E3 beans.
There's a reason we call it the Corn School. Videos on everything from planter setup, weed control, field trial results, yield strategies, and so much more. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF, Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast from your favorite streaming service. Download the latest podcast today.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by Pride Seeds, BASF, and Syngenta Canada.
Welcome back to Real Ag Radio. I am your host on this Friday, September 1st, if you can believe it, Lyndsey Smith. All right, this segment is brought to you by low-rate NBT solutions that claim to protect nitrogen, but no imitator product delivers, like Anval. Nitrogen stabilizer, the next-gen urease inhibitor from Koch Agronomic Services. See how others stack up to the proven power of Anval at defendyourn.ca. I don't know who came up with that address, but I love it. All right. It is time for the issues panel. Joining me today from Manitoba, it is Kelvin Heppner with Real Agriculture. Kelvin, how are you?
Doing well here, Lyndsey. Hard to believe it. Like you said, hard to believe it's September 1st. But with how dry things have been here this summer, the trees are turning color already. So I guess, yeah, fall is around the corner.
The end is nigh. But also, you know what that means, Kelvin?
I'm not sure. Hockey season is around the corner? Back to school.
No, back to school. The most wonderful time of the year.
Our kids go back next week. I think did Alberta go back this? I'm not sure, but our kids have I call it a false start to the school year next week, and then it really starts in earnest the following week.
Oh, you have like the 2 days, and then
2 days and interviews and stuff like that. So
yeah, we are actually going to talk a little bit about hockey, but I'm going to bring in our other guest first, Stuart Person with MNP, based out of Alberta, joining us from Saskatchewan today. Stuart, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Lyndsey. Super excited today because I get to take off my MNP hat today and put on my farmer hat and celebrate the Labor Day weekend as I do every year by working.
By laboring. That's what you get to do, and that is fantastic. So yes, at the farm in Saskatchewan. So thanks for taking time out of the day. We're going to say, that they need you desperately, so we'll try and get through this as quick as we can. I do want to just very quickly talk about hockey, because this week we did see the Professional Women's Hockey League get the original 6 teams named, and guess what, Kelvin? There's an Ottawa team.
Did
you see that?
I saw that, yes.
Yes, I am
teams,
super pumped.
6. Yeah, Ottawa.
Yeah.
I wish there was one closer this way in Western Canada.
I know.
But,
well,
maybe
there's
the legal
Minnesota, I think, is your closest.
Yes.
So not in Canada. You'll have to cross the border. Anyway, just a shout out there for everybody. Low key, there's like a pool going around already on my end. So Ottawa, we are super excited. Okay, so let's bring it on home though for everybody. No one came here for sports talk, although that might be the first sports talk in 2 weeks. But let's talk. We'll start on the economic data. We did have the GDP numbers out this morning. Kelvin, let's start there. A disappointment is what we're going to call this one.
Yeah, not as strong as expected. The consensus was that Canada would have seen annualized GDP growth in the second quarter of 1.2%. positive. That was the expectation, and the number from StatsCan came in at negative 0.2%. So we actually saw on an annualized basis in the second quarter, we saw the Canadian economy shrink slightly, and so tipping into a recession territory or kind of trending in that direction. So certainly with the Bank of Canada interest rate decision coming up next week, this will reduce the odds of them introducing another hike. It certainly looks like they will likely just hold in their decision next week.
Reduce the odds, but doesn't make them disappear entirely. Now, Kelvin, and I should state for the record, there are 3 of us here. Not one of us is actually an economist. So we're going to speak about these things, of course, from our experience and from what we're thinking. But nobody take advice from us on interest rates, please. But when are we officially in recession? How many quarters is it?
Well, it's usually 2 quarters, I believe. I don't know the official. This is something that not everybody agrees on either, but usually if there's 2 quarters of contraction in a row, that's considered a recession. And so this would be the first half of that is now officially in the books, according to, or on the record, according to StatsCan and the numbers today. So, yeah, certainly not a rosy picture. And this already, the last interest rate hike only took place in late June, I believe. So this would already not have been fully accounting for the latest hikes. So it remains to be seen here in terms of the timing, how quickly the economy is turning around, how quickly this ship is turning, and whether the Bank of Canada and other central banks can time this to avoid a recession. That's the big question.
Right. They keep telling us they don't want one, but I feel like that's somewhat disingenuous. But again,
some things have to break for it to. We can't continue the trend that we were on for the last 30 years with continually decreasing borrowing costs. So some things are going to break in the meantime here.
Kelvin, you and your facts and your measured answers. Okay. Stuart, that does bring us to interest rates, of course, and all the discussion around it. We've got a poll out this week on, what would you do? It was my question for the Farmer Rapid Fire yesterday. And, if you had to take out a long-term loan right now, what would you do? Today you're wearing your farmer hat, but of course, in your line of work, how concerned are farmers about this increased cost of borrowing right now when it comes to running their businesses?
Yeah, I think it's a major concern. I mean, with how fast the rates have gone up and how much they've gone up, there's going to be a lot of loans coming up for renewal over the next 2 to 3 years that we're going to be faced with some tough decisions. I mean, what one might think is that we're probably getting near the top based on what Kelvin said there. If we are, maybe these interest rate hikes have achieved the goal and slowed the economy down, we'll maybe see some more or some lower inflation numbers, which will, hopefully cause that pause to remain or maybe a further reduction in the future. So it would be hard, I think, to be locking anything in at this point, thinking that, we may see reductions coming in the future. But some of the last reading that I had done on this was that there was no expected reduction in rates, at least for another year or longer. So I guess it just depends on how you want to play that out. The other thing I would just comment on is, even though these rates are, feeling like they're a lot higher than they've been, obviously in the more recent past, on the long-term scale, they're still not extremely high, I wouldn't say. And so, if you've been cautious with your business planning and haven't been overly aggressive, most operations should be able to handle these rates. They're still, historically, in a mid to even in some cases a low range compared to what we saw, into when you saw double-digit interest rates. So I think it's just going to, one of the things we do expect to see here is that land prices, will likely be impacted by this because it just, the ability for producers to purchase land at the prices it's been at is going to be a lot harder going forward with these kind of interest rates. It's not going to make the same sense it did when you had a 2 or 3% interest rate.
I mean, it is true when we look at interest rates. I mean, historically, let's say not, incredibly high. But if we look at, let's say, the last 10 years, especially, a huge difference. I think one of the things that I hear as well, and I'm glad you brought up land prices, because it is the, how do you run the numbers for every sort of large capital purchase, but also just, your operating loans, these sorts of things that are often variable. Just servicing that debt does sting a little for sure. I think what a lot of people are saying though too is that this is also combined with just the higher cost of everything. So it's like, yes, historically maybe this isn't the most expensive borrowing ever, but everything costs just so darn much more. Everything from our groceries to our fuel to all these sorts of things. So definitely I think, I guess hindsight will tell us, yes, this was necessary. This increase in rates, was it too fast? Do we see them at all pull back? Stuart, I will say I don't hear a lot of that reduction talk. And maybe, Kelvin, you can weigh in on this, but we could see these rates sustained for quite some time. It doesn't mean that they have to go down, right, Kelvin?
Yeah, exactly. And the longer it lasts, that I think the more impact it will have, going back to Stuart's comments on land values. It seems like so far land values have maintained their strength, and we haven't seen, I'm not even sure we've seen a plateauing yet. In many parts of Canada, I think land prices continue to creep higher, and I think a lot of that has to do with just cash on hand, and people had reserves that they could spend. But as those reserves get drawn down and borrowing costs are elevated, it's going to be tougher to maintain the direction in the land market, and so that's where I think we'll see softening. The longer this rates stay high, the more likely we are for a softening in the land market, whether that's a plateau or whether we actually see a bit of a correction like we did see in some parts of the country back in the 80s. I would note on the debt servicing side of things, though, Lyndsey, we did see the last of the major Canadian banks come out with their quarterly financials this week, and CIBC has hiked their loan loss provision. So this is the money that the bank sets aside for covering loans that may default. A year ago in this quarter, they had $243 million set aside for loan loss provisions, and this quarter they've set aside almost $750 million, so 3 times roughly the amount of money set aside at CIBC for covering loans that may go bad, and we've seen this same trend with other banks as well. And so not to state anything on the state of the bank's financials, but just overall what that says about the Canadian economy and where things are headed right now, that there is this elevated concern about people defaulting on loans.
Okay, wait, was that for the quarter or the year?
That's for the quarter. So that doesn't mean that that's what is going to happen. Like often they set aside this money. That's what they put aside. It's kind of it's their rainy day fund for covering if things go bad. So they do often not use that money, and it carries forward and is just been set aside and didn't get used for that purpose. But it's kind of it's the rainy day fund for the bank, kind of what they have to set aside internally, and just based on their models, what they expect how things could play out. Okay,
so way to go, bank. That sounds very reasonable and judicious use of money, but also yikes. Okay, so yes, definitely an indication of what could be, or it certainly gives us a sense of sort of how the bank is thinking as far as their confidence in some of these loans. So definitely interesting for sure. Okay, let's take a quick break. We'll end it there. We'll take a break and we'll be back with the issues panel with Stuart Person and Kelvin Heppner right after this.
Does your end stabilizer contain an active ingredient load high enough to be agronomically effective? If not, it could be costing you time and money. If you're putting down a nitrogen stabilizer, put your trust in Koch Agronomic Services. Solutions like Super U, Tribune, and Anvil. Each delivers high active ingredient concentrations that low-rate products just can't match. Compare how imitator products stack up to agronomically effective solutions at defendyourn.ca.
Infuse some energy into your next corporate event, customer meeting, or conference with RealAg Radio, Canada's national agriculture radio show. Create a unique experience at your next event with host Sean Haney, broadcasting RealAg Radio live on SiriusXM, featuring exciting guests, captivating interviews, and the latest news from the agriculture community. Contact advertising at RealAgriculture.com or call 587-787-1795 to book your on location with RealAg Radio today. Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Friday. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and this segment is brought to you by Granubor from US Borax. Ask for it by name. All right, joining me on the line, we have Stuart Person with MMP, but wearing his farmer hat today out of Saskatchewan, and Kelvin Heppner with Real Agriculture, who always wears his farmer hat because it's the only hat he's got. Okay, let's talk about, Kelvin, you wrote up some news about the Unused Housing Tax. We have a lot to unpack on this one. So first, remind us what this is, because we did, of course, talk about this a few months ago, but we've also got some producer groups that have put a letter together and sent it to a very familiar name.
Yes, last year the federal government implemented this UHT, Unused Housing Tax. The intent was to alleviate pressure on the housing supply and to discourage foreign ownership to have these, to make it so that houses and condos mainly in urban centers of Canada aren't sitting empty just as an investment or a speculative type of investment, that they are getting used, trying to address the housing crisis. And so the government implemented this 1% annual tax rate on underused housing. And as part of that, there's a requirement that companies and partnerships that own houses or residential properties have to file this form every year, basically saying, hey, this place was lived in for this amount of the year. We're not, so even if you aren't in a tax position where you owe this UHT, you still have to fill out this form every year. And so a number of farm groups, Canadian Federation of Agriculture, the horticulture, the fruit and veg groups from across the country, Canadian Canola Growers Association, cattle feeders, a lot of these groups have come together now, national groups have come together and written a letter to the new National Revenue Minister, who happens to be the former Ag Minister, Marie-Claude Bibeau. The letter also had Ag Minister Lawrence MacAulay and Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland's names on it as well. And they're asking that farms be exempted from having to file this UHT form, this return for each residential property each year. There is a fine of up to $5,000 for individuals and $10,000 for corporations for each property that they fail to submit a return on. And of course, in some of these sectors of Canadian agriculture, there's a high number of foreign workers. So you need bunkhouses and mobile homes and residential properties, houses for people to live in part of the year. And so the CRA has kind of tried to exempt some of those situations, but it isn't super clear from what we can tell. And so, yeah, these farm groups sent this letter last week to the ministers, including Minister Bibeau, asking for this exemption around the UHT. And Stuart can probably speak to this a little bit further in terms of his line of work and expertise on this.
Mm-hmm. Stuart, if you would, because there's a few things, and thanks for that, Kelvin, because of course we heard about this for a bit and then it sort of disappeared. So there's two things on the Stuart I want to sort of unpack here. Is first of all, so this has to be filed every year on every property that's owned, and so I'm not sure how much that costs as far as what that just in the paperwork side. But what impact have you anticipated on this within the farming community?
Well, it's a significant impact on the community, more so though from the administration burden. So specific to the tax itself, what we're seeing is, less than 1% of producers or claims that would be, applications that are being filed are actually triggering any tax. So greater than 99% of producers are not going to pay any tax as a result of this. However, the burden of actually filing these forms is not insignificant. There is work that needs to go into determining, first of all, if you have to file. And then once we determine you do have to file, we need the information that needs to be put onto the forms. Some of the forms are, from what we're seeing, they're written more so for the city. So when you get into things like rural route addresses and different things like that and trying to locate the residents, it's a bit of a challenge right now. We're seeing a number of producers, I think, are hearing a lot of comments from different people that, well, I don't have to pay the tax, therefore I'm not worried about it. And that's really dangerous for our farming community because, as Kelvin mentioned, there's penalties for not filing. So even though you don't trigger tax, if you don't file, you could incur, between $5,000 and $10,000 of penalties per year for not filing. So, it's just really unfortunate. I don't know if we understand at this point what the motivation of the government was around the way this was designed. If the motivation was to collect tax, it's odd that we have so many people filing that are not in a taxable position. So I don't know if there's another motivation there or what exactly the reason is to be forcing so many Canadians to be filing this return when it, wasn't the intent appeared to be to capture foreign individuals owning properties in Canada. The other thing I'll just mention on this is Kelvin mentioned partnerships, corporations, that's where a lot of our farm clients are getting caught. But we have a lot of farmers out there who do estate planning and in their estate planning, they might put the children on title to a house as part of their estate planning. Or we might actually have children buying houses or building houses on the farm that's on the parents' land. Or the parents might even be co-signing loans. And all of those things I just mentioned create a trust situation, and trusts are required to file as well under this system. So, it can be as simple as you co-signing a loan for your child and therefore having an interest in that property that can trigger a filing requirement, which, your child is building a house to live in and work on the farm. It just really doesn't make a lot of sense. So, a couple of things I would point out is we have a really good article that was written by Brittany Zare from our Stratford office. It's in the Ontario Grain Farmer. If anybody gets that publication, have a look at that in the August edition. And then if you go to our website at mnp.ca, you can just search for UHT, and our Senior VP of Tax, Anne Wasko, has a great video on it, which talks about farms. She's got a segment in there talking specifically about farms as well being caught by this. So there's lots of good information out there, but it really is an unfortunate situation that it's put the ag industry in. And I don't blame the associations for the requests they've made.
It almost seems backwards to me. Like it almost would discourage, say you buy, with consolidation of farms, you buy land and sometimes there's an old homestead that comes with it. If you're going to have to bother with this paperwork and potential risk of thousands of dollars in fines, you're going to take out, maybe if it's an older house that needs some fixing up, maybe we won't fix it up because this is just a headache to deal with another house. And right there, you're reducing the housing supply.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's just it, is that it doesn't, to your point, Stuart, like what's the motivation here? Like we know that this was put in place with an urban lens for sure. But if even if 90% of people who file don't have to, but if it's as much as, almost no one actually ends up paying the tax, then what actual difference does it make on the landscape? For sure, but also it makes no difference to the coffers either. So it feels like they've just created an administrative nightmare, and also with no real benefit really to anyone. Now, I just want clarity on one thing, Stuart and Kelvin, if you know as well. Is this any individual who owns more than one property, or is it limited to corporations or, so if your farm isn't incorporated but owns several properties, yes? Like what is the trigger of whether or not you need to file this form?
Yeah, I mean, the easy answer to that, Lyndsey, the simple answer is it depends.
Oh gosh, no!
Which is the typical tax answer that you would get.
Right.
I mean, you really do have it. I would caution us all to not try to answer that question in a simple term. You really do need to sit down and take a look at it. I mean, you could think that you're fine because you're a Canadian citizen or Canadian resident and you're owning your house personally, yet you know what? Somebody's co-signed on a loan and boom, you're into it, right? So, there's so many little quirks to how you're determined as to whether or not you have to file, that I would just caution people, if you own a house, you should probably have a look at least in year one. And then if nothing changes after that and you've determined that you don't need to file, then you're probably good after that, right? But
okay. Good advice. Yeah. Everybody talk to your accountant. Just do it. They're nice people. Mine is anyway. So there you go. Okay. Good advice though, for sure, is that, and, I really think, and I'm quite hopeful that we see some movement on this, that, this isn't the first time certainly that we've seen some sort of new rule or new law come out, and, it doesn't necessarily in implementation actually make a lot of sense. So let's hope, that we get some movement on this one for sure. We've got a lot more to cover, and we seem to be very wordy today. Everyone, I just want to note actually for the record that to me, UHT is ultra high temp, which is how like cream is treated here. So my creamer for my coffee is ultra high temp milk. So there you go. That's the other ag spin on UHT. All right. Okay, let's take a quick break. We'll be back with our last segment of the Issues panel here on RealAg Radio.
This year might bankrupt us. If I lose the farm, I'm letting down generations of my family. Why am I the only one who can't handle it? Maybe the farm would be better off without me. Hello?
Hey, I was just thinking about you and thought I'd say hi. I know it's been a hard season, and I wanted to see how you're holding up.
We might feel alone, but we're all in this together. Visit domore.ag for mental health supports tailored for the agriculture community.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith. And do you want true nitrogen protection? Skip imitator products for an agronomically effective solution like Super U, premium fertilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. Super U protects against all three forms of loss and is proven to boost yield potential. See how others stack up at defendyourn.ca. All right, it is the Issues panel. Joining me, Kelvin Heppner, Stuart Person. We have already covered a lot of ground, but we have, oh goodness, this is the big one. What is it? Whiskeys for drinking and waters for fighting over. Never has perhaps that been more true as what we're seeing happening in BC right now. We've got full-on water war. So, Kelvin, catch us up. This was, I think, just 2 weeks ago. The press release went out that the BC government was making moves to protect water. But that included turning off irrigation access.
Irrigation specifically for forage crops, the BC government has made the decision effective August 16th that approximately almost 400 license holders in the lower Salmon River and Bissett Creek area have to stop using water for forage crops. So, yeah, and this is to protect the fish populations, the Chinook salmon as they move up the river, and of course, there's a lot of controversy as to whether there's scientific basis to actually support this move by the provincial government, as it's quite detrimental now to the forage producers. As a lot of the alfalfa and hay crops grown for feeding that dairy industry in the Fraser Valley in southern BC comes from this area, and so if they all of a sudden have to turn the taps off, like has had to happen here the last couple of weeks, that third cut sounds like it's at risk, and so. Yeah, certainly tensions are high right now in this part of BC when it comes to having access to water for forages. They are so other water uses in agriculture are still allowed in terms of livestock and irrigating or water for vegetable crops, but the irrigation of forage crops is what the government has decided to restrict here.
Now, Stuart, in prepping for today's Issues panel, you sent a really fascinating short video. It's about 20 minutes, little documentary that was just put together. It is very recent on exactly this. So pretty fascinating, but a very stark sort of discussion on really a pretty significant rub between those that are trying to irrigate and the province saying they may not.
Yeah, and you gotta really feel for the producers in this situation. If you watch the video, these guys have made their plans throughout the year to grow their crops, and they need that irrigation to finish what they're doing. So it's changing the goalposts on them kind of mid game, right? And I guess that that's something that. Both the producer groups in BC and the BC government need to get some more clarity on going forward, because it's really hard to run a business when things like that are going to happen to you mid-year. I think the one thing that is concerning as well is the government in British Columbia citing that Agristability is theirs for producers to apply for. And if you watch the video, most of these producers would be indicating that this third crop or the third cut is where all the profit is on their farm. So in this case, it would be unlikely that Agristability is going to provide any relief because it's the profit that they're losing at this point. It's, and maybe it will create some shallow losses for them, but shallow losses are not typically covered by Agristability. So, really there would need to be an ad hoc program of some sort to compensate them for the impact this is going to have, because, these producers are going to watch their profit go out the window here, and it's going to put some of them into a loss, maybe some of them into break even. Agristability is not designed to assist in that specific instance.
So, and you bring up a really good point, is that, and let's face it, not everybody will claim to understand these programs inside and out. So I am very glad that you're here to sort of lay out some of what we know and what, maybe is up for debate. But, a provincial government essentially relying on a federal program that without, I think this seems like they don't truly understand it, also doesn't necessarily pass the smell test, I guess is what I'm saying, is that this is an induced turning off of the taps that they've decided to do. And one of the things that we should point out is that for at least according to this documentary, most of this water is being pulled out of aquifers, not out of rivers. And the farmers that are highlighted within it have showcased the technology they're using to try and minimize the amount of water they're using. But exactly that, it is well into the season. And they make the point, and I'm glad that they do this, to tie it into food production. Because, of course, as Kelvin, as you said, the tap has stayed on for vegetable production, and of course, yes, to water livestock, but not necessarily to water the forage crop that's going to feed those livestock. So these producers, of course, are saying, yes, we may be forage producers, but that becomes your milk and your cheese and your, these sorts of things. So a really interesting one there, but it does beg the question about the role of programs in something like this, in something like water wars. And this, yes, is related to irrigation, but not the first time we've certainly heard that, Agristability is not necessarily a disaster relief. We've got something like Agri-Recovery for that. But earlier this week, we did hear from Tara Mulhern-Davidson out of Saskatchewan, who's been in a drought situation for several years. And she stated that Agristability has not worked for her. Stuart, obviously you don't know her entire history, and I wouldn't expect you to comment on that specifically, but what are some of the factors that work into Agristability that means it may not actually pay out even in years of drought?
Yeah, I mean, I did listen to the interview on Tuesday, and there's just a number of factors that would go into trying to assess that situation. The interesting part with cattle ranching is, when you do have a drought, generally that means they're into a situation where they're purchasing feed. And so the question becomes, well, did the purchase of that feed, did it reduce the profit that the farm made, or did it throw them into a loss, right? And that's the key, just as I discussed on the BC situation. If it's just a reduction of profit, then we wouldn't expect Agristability to kick in. But if it throws them into a loss situation, then that's where Agristability will start to trigger. And it can't just be a shallow loss. It has to be a deeper loss before you're going to start to see funding from Agristability in the cattle ranching sector. So I think that's where some of the confusion comes in with producers, is they say, well, I normally make $100,000 a year profit for my farm. I'm now making a $10,000 profit because of the drought. They're looking at it saying, well, I lost $90,000. Well, your net income is down $90,000, but the program hasn't been designed to protect a profit. It's been designed to help protect against losses. And so that's one of the misconceptions we see out there when we're talking with producers. I think another one in the cattle industry is there tends to be a lot of ad hoc payments that will go out because of droughts. And we're hearing that, with Agri-Recovery and other, per head payments going out. A lot of times those payments are allowable income for the Agristability program. So when you go to file your return, you have to include those payments in your income, which could then throw you outside of an Agristability payment. And it's almost in some ways an advance on your Agristability. So had you not got that ad hoc payment, you might have got an Agristability payment, but because you got the ad hoc payment, you don't get an Agristability payment. So That's another one. And then the other one I want to point out for what Tara, it was Tara, right?
Yes,
Lyndsey?
yeah, Tara.
Yeah, what Tara was talking about there is the multiple bad years in a row is a real problem for the Agristability program, because we use the Olympic average, which is, we drop the high and we drop the low on a 5-year basis, and we go with the 3 years in the middle. When you've got many bad years in a row, it really makes the Agristability program much less effective. And so one of the issues there that the government has, defended that on in the past is that they're looking to see a long-term our industry's sustainable businesses. And, I think they were had good intentions there of saying, well, we're not going to be supporting an industry that never makes money. But in the case of these prolonged droughts and or prolonged wet periods, you wouldn't say that a cattle business is never going to make money. You wouldn't say that a grain business is never going to make money. These are, some anomalies that are going on. So it is one of the changes that should be looked at for Agristability is how do you deal with extended periods of drought or extended periods of weather disaster, and how do you therefore deal with the fact that Agristability is the margin for Agristability is going to be depleted, and therefore payments are going to dry up way too soon in that case. A couple of other things, and sorry, I'm going on
this
here,
is
but
fascinating stuff. I really appreciate this. So keep rambling, Stuart.
A couple of other things I'll just mention on Agristability overall. Just some challenges that are out there. Again, we need more education on how this program actually works and what it was intended for. And I think the more we can get that in place, the better the industry itself will understand what its purpose is, and then we'll understand, okay, if it's not meeting the needs, why, and what else do we need, or how do we need to improve the program? So that's number one. I talked about the depleted margins as an issue already, where we need to look at extended drought periods. The third one is payment caps at $3 million. This, our farms are continuing to consolidate. We have a number of farms in Canada that the $3 million cap is just way too low for these days. I mean, and these are still family farms. They're not multinational corporations. These are family farms that $3 million cap is just too low for us to be using. And then the other piece, again, is if we're going to go to government and say, look, the program is not sufficient, we need to be having deeper discussions around the trigger point and the funded amount level to say, look, here's why this trigger point or this funded level needs to be higher, because it's not protecting the viability of our farm operations. So just changing the narrative on how we talk to government on this, I think would make a huge difference, but we need to go in with facts, and we need to go in, with evidence of why.
Mm-hmm. Kelvin, I'll sort of end it there on the discussion of, this is a program that has been up for discussion. Do you see that there's room in the months ahead to have that kind of discussion on these programs?
It's tough to make. We saw the last tweaks that they made to Agristability last year. It took them years to get to that point in terms of the federal provincial negotiations and ministers coming to the table there. I don't see a whole lot of revamping happening quickly here. Some of the things like changing that $3 million cap, that could be done quite easily, probably with the stroke of a pen, but yeah, this whole BRM, business risk management suite of programs, it takes a long time to make changes, it seems.
If any at all. All right. We are out of time, but this has been absolutely fascinating. Stuart, thank you so much for joining me on the show today, and happy farming this weekend.
Hey, thanks, Lyndsey. Have a great weekend.
All right. And Kelvin, you too.
Thank you, everyone else as well.
All right, and I will be back. Monday's show is a replay because of Labor Day, but I'll be back on Tuesday with Tuesdays with Lyndsey right here on RealAg Radio. Cheers, everybody.